Well, he had some ads put up on that same display, and when people clicked on the ads, we paid for that. Other people paid us, and we paid him. So he generated some revenue from his knowledge about these apartments in the area. We see that happening all the time. And so this enabling characteristic of the internet is creating businesses where they didn't exist before. Google Book Search is another example of something which Google is seeking to accomplish, and that is to unlock information that's in media that are not online today. I'd like to distinguish very clearly between knowing what is in a book and presenting the contents of the book online. Those are two very different actions. Our interest is primarily in trying to help people discover if there are books in existence that have in-general content which they care about. Whether or not the book itself can be placed online to be presented that way is up to the copyright holder. So we don't make any assumptions about that. But we do believe that indexing is very valuable. If you have a personal library of books, and if, like me, you've stood in the middle of the library thinking, there's a book in this library that has some information in it that I want, and I can't remember which book it is, if only the indexes were available, I could search the index, find out which book it is, and take that book off the shelf and read it. But of course, we can't do that today unless Google is successful with Google Book Search. So that's our primary motivation, is to help people find the information. Whether they get it online or not is a separate question. There's a debate, and I'm sure many of you are following that debate in the newspapers, about whether the indexing of a book is a fair use of the book's content or not. Not everyone in a copyright regime has this concept of fair use, which arose, at least in the United States, concurrently with the advent of dry copying, Xerox copying. The book publishers became quite worried that they would publish one book, or sell one copy of a book, and then everyone would run off and duplicate it on the Xerox machines. Of course, that didn't happen. Part of the reason for it is that it's more expensive to copy it that way than it was to buy the book. Second, the format was awful. In our case, 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper that fell over and got messy all over the floor. So, in fact, the sale of books did not drop as a result of copiers being invented, but the notion of fair use of copying small parts of the book had to be invented in order to accommodate the ability and ease of copying, economically copying small parts of these texts. I noted that Lawrence Lessig is also mentioned in the KPMG booklet that I found on my chair. Maybe you found one as well. Lawrence is at Stanford University and takes the view that the digitizing of information, making the ease of storage and distribution and reproduction easy, requires a complete rethinking of the copyright concepts in the context of digitized information. I also agree with that and strongly recommend that you look into the Creative Commons idea, because many people who are the creators of information, the authors, the composers, the performers, and who want their information to be available, would like more choice as to what controls they maintain or release in the information. Some people will compose a piece of music and they just want everybody to listen to it, and they aren't interested in being compensated. Other people might say, well, you can listen to some of it, but I want you to pay me if you take all of it. The Creative Commons mechanisms allow a very rich range of options for saying what kinds of compensations, if any, what kinds of constraints, if any, you want to impose as the holder of the rights. And finally, I wanted to mention something about technologies like BitTorrent and Napster and Kazaa. You'll recognize these as often associated in the press with evil copying and distribution of copyright material. The problem here is that we should distinguish the technology from its abuse. It's always true that almost any new technology can find, that people can find a way to abuse that technology and do ill with it. BitTorrent is a good example. It was a very effective, very clever way of distributing information around the internet to allow large files to be copied, to be transferred on demand from a great many different sources, so small amounts would come from many different places in the net. keeping the net from becoming overloaded with an intense hotspot in one place, because the downloading took place over a large range of sources. Well, it was being used to distribute illegally copyright movies, for example. The movie industry was first up in arms, having followed the music industry into this digital environment, but then later figured out that the economics of distribution were so attractive that maybe they should actually use the BitTorrent technology. So now Time Warner and others have licensed the BitTorrent technology, and they're using it to distribute their copyright material encrypted so that it's easily distributed, and then of course you have to buy a key in order to unlock it. But instead of sending 35mm film cans around, thousands of them, to launch a movie, BitTorrent may be the mechanism by which these digitized movies are delivered to suitable projection units at various theaters, so as to make the distribution less expensive and faster. And oh, by the way, if it's a really popular movie, it's easy to reproduce another instance of the film and show it on another projector, as opposed to waiting for another can of 35mm film to be produced. Well, I was going to just say a little bit about the kinds of devices that you're finding on the net. Personally, I've been stunned to find things like refrigerators and picture frames on the internet. And of course, telephones I kind of anticipated, because whether you believe it or not, we were doing experiments with digitized and packetized voice as early as 1975. Remember that a lot of this work was funded by the Defense Department, and they were very interested in using this new computer communication technology for command and control, which at that time often meant voice communication. Of course, we didn't have a very fast backbone then. The backbone of the internet was running at 50 kilobits per second. That's not a bleepo. That really is, it was 50 kilobits per second. And you'll know that voice usually takes 64 kilobits per second per voice call. So, and that's full duplex. So in fact, you couldn't put very much voice on this network. So we attacked the problem by compressing the voice down to 1800 bits per second. This produced an understandable voice, but it made everyone who talked through the system sound like a drunken Norwegian. Then the day came when I had to demonstrate this to a bunch of generals at the Pentagon, and I thought, okay, how am I going to do this? And then I remembered that one of the participants in the development of packetized speech was the Norwegian Defense Research Establishment. So we got a hold of Ingvar, and we said, okay, Ingvar, talk into the regular telephone system, which he did. And then we said, now talk through our fancy new packetized compressed voice system. It sounded exactly the same. We didn't tell the generals that everybody would sound that way if they talked through the system. But the most amazing development, in my opinion, is this young fellow in the middle who has invented an internet-enabled surfboard. He must have been off in San Diego waiting for the next big wave to come, and he was thinking, you know, if I had a laptop in my surfboard and a Wi-Fi service at the radio, at the rescue shack, that I could be surfing the net while I'm surfing the ocean, while I'm waiting to surf the ocean. So he built a laptop into his surfboard, and now he sells this as a product. Well, I think there are going to be billions of internet-enabled devices on the net. Things at home, appliances, things in the office, things in the car, things that you've got strapped to your body. There could be 100 different devices per person in this ultimate expansion of the internet. Some of them you see already, like web TVs with the little infrared keyboards in the hotels, and PDAs that many of you have now,